know me enough to know that my day job, I work in a legal department. And I've been doing this for about 17 years. Most of this time I've been a paralegal. And I sort of fell into it. I was looking for a job, and Jean Gage gave me a job. And she's like, why don't you come work for me? And, even though it's not like what I always dreamed of being, I'm actually pretty good at it because I love analyzing things. I really love reading and digging into the case law and trying to figure out how it all works together. And I'm very inquisitive and analytical. And a good day for me would be reading cases and looking for, right now I work in regulatory law, and then writing about it and putting something together. So I am a legal nerd. So it won't surprise you that this week I was kind of excited because there was some really good legal material out there. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? So you could listen to the oral arguments of the Supreme Court of the United States. Did you know they record them? So if you missed it, you can go back and listen to it. For something at work a while back is when I found out that they actually recorded them. I listened to some oral arguments for like 3 hours. I wrote a summary. I gave it to my bosses. But this week I only listened to about an hour. I got to listen to it live. I had to take Kevin to get his to return his rental car and then come home. So I listened to about an hour of it. And I, it's very interesting. And I think if you've been listening to the talking heads lately in the media, you know that our court presently is all about originalism or textualism. And what did our founders mean? What were they thinking? And they will focus on every single word. And not just the words, but also what? The punctuation. A comma here, a period there. And so you're probably sitting there going, what the heck is she talking about? And are we ever going to get to what we're here for this morning? And that is love, period. And it's not even as much the word love, but it is the period that I'm going to focus on. And I am going to focus on the original meaning of that. Love, period, has been the mantra of Aldea since its very beginning. Love has been its only tenet, its only defining belief. When you came here for the first time, if you were looking for one of those long lists of how we believe, what we believe, and then there's like a dozen things listed there, you didn't find it, did you? Because it doesn't exist. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened in the room where 4 people, 4 guys, Dave, Kevin, Jared, and Tom, were sitting around and dreaming up Aldea. Now, I consider all of us that were there at the beginning, and a few of you are here this morning, founders, but this is what was happening in the room. And they were the dreamers. They were the ones that they dreamed up what you were experiencing this morning. And honestly, it was quite a dream and maybe times a nightmare. They were doing at that time what a lot of people now call deconstructing. They were deconstructing their faith, postmodernism deconstruction. And I don't remember those words at the time. So now when I hear them, I kind of chuckle to myself because I think, oh, well, we were deconstructing long before it was popular. But they were deconstructionists quite ahead of their time. So this week I interviewed 2 of those guys. I actually saw Jared not that long ago after years of not seeing him, but we all were at Dave's house and Jared was there. And I wish I'd asked him, to talk about it then, but that was actually before I knew I was speaking. So I do get to talk to one of them quite regularly, and then I talk to Dave now and then. So, and I should stop here because I'm assuming that many of you know who I am. My name is Sylvia Skinner, as Jake said. My husband, Kevin Skinner, was one of these founders, and so when I'm referring to Kevin, that's who that is. But in the room, they started talking about, what are we going to name this? The church at the time was Community Church of the Foothills. And they knew that we were going to birth something new. But what are we going to call it? And Jared said, what about La Aldea? And La Aldea in Spanish means the village. And they loved that. They loved this idea of having something that would have a local appeal to our community, because they really were wanting to build a community. And so La Aldea was what it was originally called. It was shortened to Aldea. But then there was kind of like this, well, what are we going to believe? What are we going to, we're deconstructing, what are we going to get rid of, and what are we going to keep? And I talked about so many churches have their statement of faith and a constitution. Usually there's a church constitution. And what they deconstructed got rid of all that and came up with a single statement of faith, one word and one punctuation. And then some statements, the ends and the means. And if you were here this summer, then you heard Jean Gage go over those so beautifully. Just, we have to have some, direction of how we're going to carry this out, right? But it was Dave who said, we were coming out of a Christian tradition and a faith tradition that focused on Jesus. So he was asking the question of himself and of those that were there, what meant the most in the life of Jesus? They were coming out of this dogma of evangelical Christianity and a rules-based way of living, but they were longing for something so much more. And they all agreed it was simple. It was loving people. When I asked Kevin the why the period, why was it love period? Why wasn't it just love? We love you, come in, you belong, you're welcome here. He said, love period is full stop. And nearly all evangelical churches at the time, including our own, were getting really good at telling people we love you. In fact, I have some memorabilia. I'm sorry, that's me. I have some memorabilia here. This is from Community Church of the Foothills. And I actually worked at the church at one point, and I ordered all these. I ordered about 700 of these that we gave out on a Christmas Eve, filled with candy. And we wanted to make sure that these mugs had a really powerful statement of what we wanted people to know about Community Church of the Foothills. And we were already very committed to this idea. But it says, you matter to God, you matter to us. And that was very true. And many churches were telling people, we love you. The doors are open. When I was a kid, we got people into the church by going out and getting them saved and bringing them in. And that's what we called it. We were saving them. Go get them saved and bring them in. But during the time that Aldea was born, churches were opening their doors and making them more friendly, and good music and really good coffee. Coffee was important, lots of treats. But it wasn't enough to say, you matter to us. What they really wanted to communicate was love, period. That's it, full stop. Dave explained it to me like this. Many communities are saying, sure, come into our community and we'll even love you. But at some point, and there will come a point, where in order to truly belong here, you gotta fall in line with, remember that statement of beliefs, because those never went away. Sadly, we are all familiar with that statement of beliefs, or many of us. The one that excludes people for a whole long list of reasons. I believe these founders were very resolute in their belief that there would be nothing that would exclude someone from the community. Not their sexuality or their expression of it, the color of their skin, their place in life, whether they liked country music or the Green Bay Packers. Everyone was loved, period. Our founders even believed that if someone held the belief that others should be excluded because they were, and you fill in the blank, and if they wanted to come to Aldea, they were welcome. Of course, people that hold strongly to those kinds of beliefs quickly decided this is not the place for me, and probably it was a good idea. And for the sake of the community, Aldea's founders asked everyone, you hold your ideas and your beliefs as passionately as you want, but please hold them loosely so that there's room for everyone to be loved. You know, a lot of people were skeptical. A lot of people were skeptical. A lot of people didn't like this idea. A lot of people said, well, how can you be about one thing? How can we define ourselves by love, period? It was too simple, too nebulous, too easy, too eccentric. It lacked depth and reason and imagination. This was a question we often heard. How is anybody going to grow spiritually if all you talk about was love? Won't you run out of things to talk about? Are the only songs you're going to sing written by John Lennon or Ziggy Marley? What's the Ziggy Marley song? Love is my religion. We sang that a lot. You know, I wonder back in the day how many people showed up to sit at the feet of Jesus thinking they were going to be there for hours listening to a whole long list of things that would give them the secret to life. And then when they got there, they were disappointed because they got a simple children's message, because that's usually who was sitting at Jesus' feet. It was children and women who really didn't count at that time. And Jesus said, love, that's it. Love God, love your neighbor, love yourself. Just love, embody love. Jesus said, I'm going to give you a new commandment. You've got this whole list of commandments. I'm going to give you a new commandment. And it was to love. Love was the central theme of Jesus' message. And love has been the central theme of all the greatest voices throughout time. Here are just a few of those voices. Gandhi said, where there is love, there's life. The Buddha said, love is a gift of one's innermost soul to another, so both can be whole. Rumi said, love is the water of life. Jump into this water. And Jesus said, a new command I give you. Love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. You know, here's just a couple of examples of how Jesus responded to the question. So, Jesus, I really like what you're about, but so how do I get in on this? And you know, he told the rich young ruler, love the poor more than you love your money and your power, and give it all away. And to the educated man, Nicodemus, Jesus said, love children, love the simplicity of children more than you love your knowledge. Remember, at this time, children meant nothing. So in everything Jesus said, it came down to love. Jesus' message of love doesn't really fit the Christianity that we see today, does it? Especially not modern day Christianity. You know, I thought about this week, and I struggled with this the whole time I grew up in the Christian faith about what to do with Jesus, because I always sensed this dissonance between what he said and what the people in my church were saying to me and how to live my life. And I thought, you know, for the most part, Jesus is still up on that cross. And they see him as a savior and they see him as a martyr and a savior. But his ideas, they're either still up on the cross or they're left in the grave. This idea of revolutionary love. That's what mattered the most. And I was always confused as a child, making the stories, what Jesus said, and what I was taught about Jesus work together and make sense. I didn't have any language for it at the time. I didn't know what love, period, was, but I believed it. I believed it long before the cool kids at Aldea. And so when it came along, it has always resonated so deeply with me. For most of my education growing up, I went to Christian schools. And these schools were, for the most part, non-denominational schools. So we had a little bit of everything there. They were mostly Baptists or Pentecostals, and, they don't get along so well. There were a few Lutherans, but, Lutherans have their own schools. They have very good schools. There was a Methodist or two, and there were some definitely in the closet non-believing kids whose parents really just wanted them to be in a safer environment. And I chuckle at that because the irony is we had everything in our high school. We had sex, we had drugs, we had rock and roll, we had it all. We just knew how to keep it hidden. And in our school, we also had a handful of Catholic families. It's unusual. And I imagine we had some Jewish families as well, but we had a few Catholics. And in 8th grade, I made friends with a girl named Judy. And she was my very best friend in the world. I loved her family. I think there were 8 or 9 kids, and they were a Catholic family. And all their names started with J. And I named 2 of my kids with M's, and I won't say I regretted it because I love their names, but I constantly couldn't get their names right. So I don't know what you do with 9 kids who are named with J. And Judy's home was small. She had one of those little houses where every kid and every animal was in there, but it was a home that was so filled with love. And I think she was somewhere in the middle of this list of kids. A couple of the kids had grown out. Maybe one was in college. She had an older sister and a younger sister, and then I think another sister in elementary school. And I remember going to this home, and it was so filled with love. It also meant a lot to me to be part of this family because they welcomed me in. They didn't care what I believed or what church I went to. They just welcomed me into their home. And at the time, my home, which, I was told was allegedly believing everything right, wasn't a home filled with love. My house was falling apart. My parents, a few years later, would be getting a divorce. I barely spoke to my brother. My home felt cold and dark and empty, but not at Judy's house. And I think I went to Judy's church a couple of times, and like I said, they were very devout in their faith. In fact, so devout, they were originalists in the Catholic world. They went to a church that was, somebody's laughing, they went to a church that was in Russian, I believe, because their belief system predated the Roman Catholic Church. They didn't follow the Pope. They didn't, they were very, very devout Catholics. And I went a few times with her to church, and I discovered pretty quickly that my friend Judy was a little bit of a rebel. And they lived quite a ways from our school, and so on the nights that I would stay over and we would go to school together, I'd ride in their station wagon with them. And I learned very quickly from Judy's mama, that there was silence in the car. Everybody had to be quiet and had their heads down because they were tasked with saying the rosary on the way to school. And I would just sit there, And I also figured out pretty quickly that Judy was a rebel too because she was not saying the rosary. And pretty soon it was all about making faces at each other and trying not to laugh while we got to school. And she said, yeah, I don't say it. I just let them think I'm saying it. Well, this made me really curious about confession because I knew what confession was. So I said, hey, Judy, well, do you do that? Do you really go in there and tell the priest everything you do? Oh, no. No. So I tell him just a couple of things so I can get out of there with a few prayers, and then I'm good to go. So I told you I was a little bit of a rebel at that time too because of what I believed about Jesus and love and who could be in and who could not be in. And my whole world at that time was about who gets to go to heaven. And we were taught that there were very specific qualifications, one of which is that you have to go to the right church. And this gets really complicated because the right church is not the right Christian, well, Catholics are Christians, but the right Protestant church, but the right version of the Protestant church. And of course, the church I went to was the right church. So, of course, I had to ask my dad because he was somebody that I did look up to when it came to matters of faith. And I said to him, I'm like, Dad, "What, is my friend Judy going to go to church?" And he said, "No, Sylvia. She will not go to heaven, not as long as she is Catholic." I can't tell you the devastation I felt. And so I argued. I said back very passionately, "But she loves Jesus too. In fact, she believes Jesus died on the cross. She believes Jesus is sitting at the right hand of God." That's the thing you had to say. "Dad, how can it be? She's a Christian just like I am." And of course, I got the answer. No. She believes Mary was a virgin, but she also believes she's perfect and without sin. When she takes communion, she thinks it really becomes the blood and body of Christ. She eats fish on Fridays. She says meaningless prayers to idols. All those statues they have in their church? We don't have those. She confesses her sins to a priest. She has extra books in her Bible. And I remember the list just went on and on and on. And I was devastated. This was my dearest friend in the world. And I had been in her home where I saw nothing but love. And I saw nothing but people who loved Jesus. And lest any of us think that list that my dad gave me is a bit ridiculous, we have to be reminded of history. The history between the Catholics and the Protestants hasn't been so great. There have been wars over these things. And I continue to argue in my heart and in my mind, doesn't Jesus say that God will love us by the way we love one another? Isn't that the important thing? And what I got from my father was silence, frustration, and anger. I'll never forget it. I think it was truly one of the most defining moments of our relationship, because I knew in my heart of hearts that I did not hold the same faith as my father. And over the years, up until the day my father died, this would play out in so many conversations. I would always run back to love as my cover, only to meet anger and frustration and disappointment, because I would not let my faith bend to the will of a father that chose his beliefs over love. I believe that I practiced my faith, my childhood faith, through the lens of love as best as I knew how. And that's what I believed in my rebel heart. I'm sometimes ashamed when I think about the things I said to others based on those lists of beliefs. Because I was there. I did it. I was a good little evangelical. I was. But I do feel like I tried to live out a love-filled faith. I can't imagine how different it would have been if I had had Aldea as a child. That's why it matters. That's why you matter so much to me. So, how does this all relate to the Supreme Court again? Oh, I'm sorry. It's my earrings that are... The justices who are so determined to get to the original meaning of what our fathers believed and wrote down on paper in order to live out their intent. There's the connection. Of course, I have my own opinions about whether this is how our justices should make decisions, but it is pretty much the theme right now. And I think we can agree that the founders of Aldea were establishing revolutionary new ideas that were brought, well, actually, what I'm meaning to say is I think the founders of our country were bringing about revolutionary ideas that were brought about with real blood, sweat, and tears. I also believe that they were deeply flawed people who were just trying to get it right in the midst of a whole lot of chaos. Aldea has the benefit of living founders. You can ask them. You can pick up the phone and ask them what they were talking about. But this week when I asked them, they actually were like, well, let me see. I think it went, such and such. I think this is what was said, because they too are deeply flawed people. who were just trying to get it right. All of us were. It was a revolutionary idea, and not everyone was on the same page. Aldea was birthed from an evangelical church of hundreds that shrunk to a group of about this size. So, and at times, this summer before Jake got here, I think I spoke to 8 people. So Aldea has definitely seen changes. We were a group of people who were just trying to get it right. I'm quite confident if any one of those men were standing before you right now, that they would say, love, period, was never meant to be defined once and for all. It has no rules. It has no boundaries. It was meant to be defined. And Jake loves those words. It was meant to be redefined over and over again. And he is redefining it so beautifully. But at its core, Aldea was meant to be lived out in love, period. And I showed you the newest little Skinner. And he embodies so much love. And this week is Valentine's Day, right? Valentine's Day for the Skinner family is Becca's Day, because Becca, Feth, her mom's a Skinner, so her last name was Feth. It's the anniversary of her death. She died when she was 30 years old. And I love that we have Valentine's Day as the anniversary because nobody embodied love more than Becca. She left 8 children behind. 8 children that she adopted. 8 children, two of whom were 2 beautiful boys from Africa that she met when she was serving over there. 6 children, all with special needs, all with challenges. And Becca's love, period, meant it doesn't matter to the child who you are, what challenges you have, what color your skin is. Becca loved them all. And so I love Valentine's Day now because it's Becca's Day. It's a day for me to remember what love really is. And I would encourage you to do the same this Valentine's Day. Make it Becca's Day